By the time the last light slipped behind the Blackwood pines, Elara Veyne understood exactly how little her pack thought her life was worth. No one met her eyes as the boundary stones came into view. The elders had called it necessary. The hunters had called it tradition. Someone behind her had whispered that perhaps the forest would finally take the bad luck with it. Elara kept walking. The pack had crossed an ancient line 3 nights earlier during a desperate hunt, and now something inside Blackwood had begun circling their homes after sunset. Livestock vanished. Claw marks appeared on doors. So the elders reached for the oldest remedy they knew: give the forest something back. They chose the healer no family would fight to keep. At the final stone, the men escorting her stopped. Elara looked over her shoulder once. Their torches trembled in the evening wind, but none of them stepped forward. "Go," one ordered. She crossed alone. The darkness swallowed the torchlight within 20 paces. Elara carried only a small healer's satchel, a water skin, and the knife she used for cutting roots. None would matter against whatever had left tracks wider than her hand along the northern ridge. The first growl came before the moon rose. She ran. Branches tore at her sleeves. Roots caught her boots. Something enormous moved between the trees without hurry, letting her hear its weight without ever letting her see its shape. Then Elara stumbled into a clearing and found nowhere left to go. The beast stepped from the trees. It was larger than any wolf she had ever seen, its shoulders nearly level with her chest, its dark coat threaded with silver beneath the moonlight. Its eyes fixed on her with an intelligence that frightened her more than hunger would have. Elara raised her knife. The beast took one step. Then its front leg buckled. Only then did she see the blood. A deep wound cut across its shoulder, darkening the fur almost black. "You're hurt," she whispered. The beast bared its teeth. Elara's hand shook, but she slowly lowered the knife. She had treated wolves before. Never one that could kill her before she finished blinking. "If you wanted me dead," she murmured, "I think I'd already be dead." The beast watched as she opened her satchel. She crushed yarrow and bitterroot between trembling fingers, mixed them with water, then moved close enough to smell rain, blood, and something wild beneath its fur. It growled when she touched the wound. Elara froze. The teeth remained inches from her throat, but it did not bite. So she kept working. Hours passed beneath the trees. Elara stayed beside the beast because moving seemed more dangerous than remaining. Each time her eyes drifted shut, she expected claws. Instead, the creature kept watch. At dawn it rose. Elara backed away. The beast approached, lowered its massive head, then pressed one claw lightly against the inside of her wrist. Cold fire raced through her arm. Elara gasped. A dark silver mark spread beneath her skin. Before she could understand it, the beast turned toward the trees. It looked back once. Then Blackwood swallowed it. Elara stared at the mark on her wrist. She had entered the forest believing the miracle would be surviving until morning. Now she understood survival had only opened a more dangerous question. Why had the beast let her leave? Elara did not remember deciding to walk back toward the boundary. She only remembered the silver-black mark beneath her skin and the strange certainty that the beast was no longer following her. Morning had transformed Blackwood. The same trees that had seemed like walls in the darkness now stood motionless beneath pale sunlight. Nothing attacked her. Nothing tried to stop her. When the boundary stones finally appeared, Elara nearly laughed from relief. Then she saw the people waiting beyond them. The hunters who had abandoned her were gathered with several elders. Their expressions changed as she emerged from the trees. No one smiled. One man actually stepped backward. "Elara!" She crossed the boundary. The murmuring began immediately. She survived. "That's impossible." Elara ignored them and kept moving until an elder caught sight of her wrist. "What is that?" She instinctively covered the mark. Too late. The elder seized her forearm and turned it toward the light. The dark silver line seemed almost motionless now, resting beneath her skin like something asleep. The men around her recoiled. "What did you do?" Elara pulled free. "I survived." What happened in there? She thought of enormous teeth inches from her throat, of blood beneath black fur, of the beast remaining beside her until dawn. It was wounded. Silence. "You saw it." "Yes." "And it let you live?" Elara looked down at the mark. I don't know why. Fear moved through the gathering faster than any answer could have. Someone demanded that she be confined. Another argued that whatever had marked her might follow her back. The same people who had sent her into Blackwood to satisfy the creature now seemed terrified that she had returned carrying something they did not understand. Elara felt exhaustion hardening into anger. They had expected a corpse. Her survival had become the new problem. Before the elders could decide what to do with her, hoofbeats thundered along the eastern road. Royal riders. The reaction was immediate. Conversations died. Men straightened. A black standard bearing the royal crest appeared between the trees, followed by armored riders spreading through the settlement. Their commander dismounted. By order of Alpha King Kael Draven, every settlement along the Blackwood border is to be searched. Elara went still. The commander continued. The king seeks a young woman recently returned from the forest. She may carry an unfamiliar mark. Elara's fingers closed over her wrist. No one had left the settlement since before she entered Blackwood. No messenger could have reached the royal stronghold and returned this quickly. Yet somehow the Alpha King already knew. A hunter glanced toward her. Elara saw the recognition beginning in his face. She moved before he could speak. She slipped behind the gathered villagers, crossed between two storage sheds, and broke into a run. Behind her someone shouted. Elara did not wait to learn whether the warning was meant for her or the soldiers. She took the narrow path beyond the healer's garden, pulled her sleeve over the mark, and disappeared toward the southern hills. By midday, royal riders were searching every road. Far away, inside the stone chambers of his stronghold, Alpha King Kael Draven stood over a table where a messenger had placed a rough drawing. A dark silver symbol. For several seconds Kael said nothing. Then his hand tightened against the table. Where? Blackwood territory, your majesty. Something painful moved beneath Kael's expression before his control returned. Find her. The messenger hesitated. And when we do? Kael lifted his eyes. Alive. Unharmed. The order was absolute. The messenger bowed and left. Only when the doors closed did Kael's breathing change. He gripped the edge of the table as pain tore through his body. His shoulders locked. His jaw clenched against a sound that never escaped him. Then slowly the episode passed. Kael straightened. His gaze returned to the drawing. Meanwhile, miles away, Elara climbed toward the southern ridge with no idea that the king hunting her had just ordered an entire territory not to harm her. She knew only two things. A beast that should have killed her had marked her instead. And somehow, before the sun had fully risen on her survival, the most powerful alpha in the kingdom had begun looking for her. By late afternoon, Elara had left the southern road entirely. The royal riders were too organized to outrun on open ground, so she followed narrow deer paths through the hills until exhaustion forced her toward an abandoned border shrine half hidden beneath ivy and leaning pines. She had barely stepped beneath its cracked stone arch when a voice behind her said, "Stop!" Elara froze. A man stood between her and the path. He wore dark traveling clothes rather than ceremonial armor, but nothing could disguise the authority in his posture. Tall, broad-shouldered, unnaturally still, he watched her with an intensity that made every instinct in her body warn her to run. She knew him without introduction. Alpha King Kael Draven. Elara reached for the small knife at her belt. Kael's gaze dropped to her hand. If I intended to kill you, I would not have ordered my men to leave you unharmed. Then why hunt me? His attention shifted to her covered wrist. Show me. No, something flickered across his face. Not anger. Fear. That frightened her more. Kael stepped closer. The mark ignited. Elara gasped as cold heat raced beneath her skin. She dragged back her sleeve and watched thin silver lines spread outward from the dark symbol. Kael stopped breathing. For one terrible instant something changed in his eyes. His control seemed to fracture beneath a force Elara could not see. He reached toward her wrist. His fingers came within inches of the mark. Then he recoiled as though touching her would burn him. Stay back, he said. Elara stared at him. You came across half the kingdom looking for me. Stay back. The command sounded directed as much at himself as at her. A growl broke from beyond the shrine. Kael turned instantly. 3 wolves emerged from the brush, lean and scarred. their attention fixed not on the king but on Elara's exposed wrist. Rogues. One lunged. Kael intercepted it before Elara could move, driving it aside. Another circled toward her. Elara did not wait to be rescued. She grabbed a fistful of dried bitterleaf from her satchel, crushed it against the shrine's old fire basin, and kicked the powder into the wolf's face as it charged. The animal recoiled, sneezing and shaking its head. "Left!" she shouted. Kael reacted immediately. The third wolf had been using the ruined wall as cover. Kael turned before it could reach him, forcing it backward while Elara scrambled toward the narrow passage between two fallen stones. "This way!" Kael followed. The passage was too tight for the wolves to surround them. Elara knew terrain like this from gathering herbs along rocky slopes. One attacker at a time was manageable. The rogues seemed to realize it too. After several tense moments, they retreated into the trees. Silence returned. Kael looked at Elara. "You could have run." "So could you." Something almost like surprise crossed his face. Elara pulled her sleeve down again. "Those wolves wanted the mark." "Yes." "You knew they might." "Yes." Anger pushed aside her fear. "Then tell me what it is." Kael's expression closed. Elara stepped toward him. This time he stepped backward. That single movement stopped her. The Alpha King had hunted her. He had crossed territory to find her. He had just fought to keep her alive. And now he was retreating from her, as though she were the dangerous one. "What happened in Blackwood?" he asked. Elara studied him before answering. "The creature was wounded. I treated it. It stayed near me until dawn. Then it marked me and disappeared." Kael's jaw tightened. What was it? For several seconds only wind moved through the ruined shrine. Finally Kael said, "Not an ordinary wolf. I already know that. That is all I can tell you." "No. That's all you're choosing to tell me." She expected the king's anger. Instead, Kael looked toward the forest, his restraint so severe it seemed painful. Elara suddenly remembered the way his hand had reached for her before he tore it back. The fear in his face when the mark awakened. She had spent the entire day believing the Alpha King was hunting her, because she had survived something she should never have seen. Standing in the ruined shrine, she began to suspect something far stranger. Kael had wanted desperately to find her. Now that he had, he seemed equally desperate not to come too close. "Then stop following me." Elara expected Kael to refuse. Instead, his gaze settled on the path beyond the ruined shrine. "If you leave alone, the rogues will try again." "That sounds like my problem. It became mine when they found you." She almost laughed. "You sent riders across the territory looking for me before they did. And I ordered those riders not to harm you. You still haven't told me why." Kael's jaw tightened. "Because there are people who will understand enough about that mark to want you and not enough to care whether you survive." It was more than he had told her before, but nowhere near enough. Elara considered the darkening hills. 3 rogues had already found her. She was exhausted, carrying little food, and had no destination they could not eventually search. "What are you offering?" "Protection." "Imprisonment." No, the answer came immediately. Kael explained that she could enter his stronghold under royal protection. Guards would watch the gates and outer grounds, but within them she would move freely. He would not confine her to a room, take her belongings or force her to reveal the mark to anyone. Elara searched his face for the trap. "And if I decide to leave?" His expression hardened, but he answered, "I will tell you it is dangerous." "That wasn't my question." A long silence passed. "I will not chain you there." It was not comfort, but it was a choice. Elara went with him. The stronghold rose from the northern cliffs before nightfall, all dark stone watchtowers and iron gates. Elara had heard stories about Kael Draven since childhood. Pack spoke his name carefully. He was the king who ended rebellions before they spread, whose authority could silence rooms without a raised voice. Yet the first thing she witnessed inside his walls was not cruelty. A frightened young servant dropped a tray as Kael passed. The crash echoed through the corridor. A guard snapped at the boy, but Kael stopped him with one look. "He dropped metal," Kael said. "Not the kingdom." The guard fell silent. Kael continued walking. Elara followed, unsettled by how poorly the moment fit the monster she had imagined. Over the next day, the contradiction only deepened. Kael kept his distance from her whenever possible. When they spoke, he stood across tables or near doors. Twice Elara caught him watching her wrist, and twice he left before she could challenge him. The third time she noticed blood. Kael was crossing an empty gallery when one hand suddenly gripped the stone wall. His breathing turned shallow. Elara moved instinctively. "Don't." She stopped. A dark stain was spreading beneath the fabric near his ribs. "You're bleeding. Leave. You need a healer." "I said leave." His voice carried enough alpha force to make her muscles tense, but Elara had spent too many years treating frightened patients to mistake aggression for strength. "You can threaten me after I stop the bleeding." She approached. Kael's eyes flashed with something almost feral. Still he did not touch her. Elara carefully opened the torn edge of his shirt near the injury. The wound looked wrong, not fresh enough to explain the blood, yet raw as if something beneath the skin kept reopening it. She asked no question she knew he would refuse to answer. She cleaned it and bound his ribs. Kael remained rigid beneath her hands. When she finished, Elara realized how close they were. His breathing had changed again, but not from pain. Her wrist began to warm. Silver spread faintly through the mark beneath her sleeve. Kael looked down, then at her. For one suspended moment, neither moved. His hand lifted toward her face. Elara did not retreat. That seemed to be what broke him. Kael stepped away so abruptly that the chair behind him struck the wall. "Enough." The word came rougher than she had ever heard his voice. He left before she could answer. Later, alone in the chamber given to her, Elara pressed her fingers against the mark. She had felt it react in the shrine. Now she had felt something else. The closer she came to Kael, the calmer his pain seemed to become even as his control grew more fragile. Elsewhere in the stronghold, Royal Scholar Mayron Vale bent over the first copy descriptions of Elara's mark. He compared the symbol against restricted records until he found a partial match in an old text concerning the royal bloodline. Mayron did not bring the discovery to Elara, nor did he bring it to Kael. Instead, he folded a private note, sealed it, and sent it to men who had been waiting for weakness in the throne. Elara knew nothing of that message. She knew only that the Alpha King had hunted her across the territory, brought her behind his walls, and then spent every moment fighting the distance between them. And for the first time, she wondered whether Kael's greatest fear was not what the mark could do to him. It was what he might do if he stopped resisting it. That question followed Elara through the next morning. Kael avoided her. She saw him once across the lower courtyard, speaking with 2 guards. His posture was controlled again, his expression unreadable, but when his eyes found hers across the distance, his attention dropped almost immediately to her covered wrist. Then he walked away. Elara had endured enough silence. By midday, she found him in a map room overlooking the northern cliffs. "I'm going back to Blackwood." Kael's head lifted sharply. No, Elara folded her arms. "That wasn't a request. The creature spared you. Once. And marked me. Which is exactly why you will not test whether it spares you twice. You won't explain the mark. You won't explain what happened to you when you came near it. You won't explain why those rogues wanted me." She stepped closer. "So I'll ask the one creature that might." Kael's expression darkened. "You think it will answer?" "I think staying here while everyone else knows more about my body than I do is worse." For a moment, she expected him to invoke his authority. Instead he said, "If you cross those boundary stones, I cannot promise what will happen. Then don't follow me." Elara left before he could answer. Hours later, she crossed into Blackwood alone, or believed she did. She had gone less than a mile when Kael emerged from between the trees behind her. Elara stopped. "You have difficulty understanding simple instructions." "I understood." "Then why are you here?" "To make sure you survive ignoring me." She should have been furious. Instead, something dangerously close to amusement touched her before she turned away. They continued deeper into the forest. The place felt different in daylight, yet Elara recognized the slope where she had fallen, then the twisted pine beyond it. Eventually they reached the clearing where she had spent the night. Nothing moved. Elara touched her wrist. "Maybe it isn't coming." A low growl rolled through the trees. Kael moved in front of her. The guardian beast stepped into the clearing. Elara's breath caught. Its shoulder still bore traces of the wound she had treated, but it stood strongly now. Its dark coat shifted with silver as sunlight broke through the branches. Kael became perfectly still. The beast's eyes fixed on him. A warning snarl exposed its teeth. Kael answered with a growl of his own. "Don't," Elara whispered. Neither listened. The beast advanced. Kael shifted his weight, readying himself. Elara stepped between them. "Elara." "No," she faced the creature. "If you wanted me dead, you had an entire night." The beast stopped. Behind her, Kael said her name again, sharper this time. Elara held out her marked wrist. The creature's aggression changed instantly. Its head lowered. Slowly. Impossibly, the enormous beast bowed before her. Elara heard Kael inhale. She moved closer. The guardian lifted its head and touched its muzzle to her wrist. Silver fire exploded beneath her skin. The forest vanished. Elara saw fragments. A man wearing an ancient crown, doubled over in agony. A woman standing before him with the same dark silver mark burning on her arm. Hands joined inside a circle carved into stone. Then something black moving from one body toward another. Elara tried to pull away. The vision shattered. Her knees gave out. Kael caught her before she struck the ground. For several seconds, Elara could hear only his heartbeat. Fast. Far too fast for the controlled man she knew. The guardian watched them from across the clearing. "What did I see?" she whispered. Kael's arms tightened around her. "Tell me." He looked toward the beast, then back at her. Something in his expression finally broke. "I thought it had killed you." Elara stared at him. "When I learned someone had crossed Blackwood and returned marked, I needed to find you before anyone else did. Then I found you and—" His voice dropped. "That made everything worse." "Why?" His gaze fell to her mouth before returning to her eyes. "Because since the moment I sensed that mark, every instinct I have has wanted you close." Elara's breath caught. Kael continued before she could answer. "And every piece of reason I have left tells me that wanting you may be the most dangerous thing I can do." The mark pulsed between them. Neither moved away. "You keep deciding what is dangerous for me," Elara whispered. His expression tightened. "Because you don't know enough yet. Then tell me enough to choose." Kael looked at her for a long moment. "I can't." Elara began to pull away. His hand closed around hers. Not her marked wrist, but her fingers. Gentle. Deliberate. "I can tell you this," he said. "Whatever this becomes, I will not claim you because a mark, a law, or an instinct tells me to." Elara looked at their joined hands. "And if I choose it?" The question seemed to cost him something. Kael released her. "Then I will have to decide whether loving your choice means refusing to accept it." Across the clearing, the guardian beast turned toward the trees. Elara watched it disappear into Blackwood again. But this time it had left her with more than a mark. She had seen an ancient alpha. A marked woman. And something passing between them. Whatever bond was pulling her toward Kael, someone before them had stood inside it. And something terrible had happened when they did. Whatever bond was pulling her toward Kael, someone before them had stood inside it. And something terrible had happened when they did. Elara returned to the stronghold because she chose to. That distinction mattered enough that when Kael offered to have guards accompany her to her chamber, she refused, and he let her walk away without argument. Over the next several days, the distance between them changed. It did not disappear. Kael still stopped himself before touching her without invitation. He still sometimes left a room when the mark began to warm beneath her sleeve. But now Elara understood that his retreats were not indifference. And Kael stopped pretending his wounds were none of her concern. When another curse episode struck him, he came to her. Elara found him seated beside the hearth in his private chamber, one hand pressed against his ribs. "You could have sent for another healer," she said. "I could have. But you didn't." "No," she knelt beside him and removed the old bandage. The wound had opened again. As she cleaned it, the tension gradually left his shoulders. Her mark warmed. Kael noticed. "So did I," Elara said before he could retreat. His mouth almost curved. For a few quiet minutes, Neither of them treated the closeness as something that needed to be feared. The next morning, Kael gave her access to the restricted royal archives. "No more deciding what I am allowed to know?" she asked. "No more than necessary." Elara raised an eyebrow. Kael exhaled. "That sounded better before I said it." It was the closest she had heard him come to admitting defeat. They searched separately at first, then together, comparing damaged records with the fragments Elara had seen in Blackwood. The answer came from Elara Veyne. The royal scholar arrived carrying a brittle volume wrapped in cloth. "I found a translation." Kael's expression immediately hardened. Elara opened the book to a faded illustration. Elara recognized the symbol. Her mark. According to the surviving text, the royal bloodline had suffered from a hereditary corruption for generations. Rarely, a marked bearer appeared whose bond with the reigning alpha could remove it. Elara looked at Kael. "You knew." "I knew part of it." "The mark can cure you." Kael said nothing. Elara tapped the page. If the translation is accurate, a completed bond between the alpha and marked bearer would purge the corruption from the royal bloodline. Hope came so quickly that Elara almost distrusted it. There was a way. Then Kael closed the book. "No," Elara stared at him. "Your Majesty, there will be no ritual." Within days, the information spread through the council. Kael's episodes were worsening. His ability to conceal them was failing. Leaders who had tolerated uncertainty now demanded action. If Elara could remove the curse, they argued, refusing the ritual endangered every pact dependent upon a stable throne. Kael refused every demand. Elara tried to understand. At first she thought he did not trust her. That hurt more than she expected. They had crossed Blackwood together. He had allowed her to see him bleeding. She had begun imagining, against all reason, that the fragile thing growing between them might survive whatever truth waited beneath the mark. Yet when a possible answer finally appeared, Kael would not even discuss it. Then Elara discovered why he had been avoiding the archives after dark. She entered one evening and found him standing before the hearth. Paper burned between his fingers. On the table lay the remains of another ancient text. Elara crossed the room and pulled an unburned fragment away before the flames reached it. "What are you doing?" Kael went still. She looked at the fragment. Most of the writing was damaged, but she recognized references to the marked bearer and the final stage of the bond. "You found more, Elara, and you destroyed it." His silence answered. Anger rose through her. "You told me I could choose." "I did. How can I choose when you keep destroying the truth? Because some choices should never be placed in your hands." The words landed harder than a shout. Elara stepped back. "So you still don't trust me?" Kael's face changed. "This has nothing to do with trust." "Then what?" He looked at the burning pages. When he spoke again, his voice was low. "The ritual may save me." Elara waited. Kael's eyes returned to hers. "And I would rather let this curse finish what it started than use that ritual on you." A chill moved through her. "Why?" He did not answer. Elara held up the surviving fragment. "What happens at the final stage?" Kael crossed the distance between them, then stopped before touching her. "Do not ask me to give you a reason to sacrifice yourself. You don't know that I would." "I know you." The certainty in his voice silenced her. For one moment neither moved. Then Elara placed her hand against his. Kael's fingers closed around hers. No command, no ritual, no claim, just a choice both of them understood. And that made the unanswered question more frightening, because Elara no longer wondered whether Kael wanted her. She knew he did. The mystery was why a man being slowly destroyed by a curse would rather die than accept the one bond everyone believed could save him. The mystery was why a man being slowly destroyed by a curse would rather die than accept the one bond everyone believed could save him. Elara got her answer sooner than Kael intended. The council stopped arguing behind closed doors. By morning, word of Kael's worsening condition had spread through the stronghold. Servants whispered about the king collapsing after another episode. Guards exchanged uneasy looks. Pack leaders who had once feared admitting weakness in the throne now demanded the ritual openly. And Elara's name was no longer secret. The marked woman. The healer from Blackwood. The woman who could save the Alpha King. She was crossing an inner passage toward the archives when men wearing royal colors stepped into her path. Elara stopped. Something was wrong. Their posture was too rigid. Their attention went immediately to her covered wrist. "Lady Elara," one said, "the council requires your presence." Then, "The council can ask." She turned. 2 more men blocked the passage behind her. Elara reached for her knife. A cloth closed over her mouth before she could draw it. When awareness returned, cold stone pressed against her back. Elara opened her eyes inside a circular chamber carved with symbols she recognized from the ancient records. The ritual chamber. Her wrist had been uncovered. The silver-black mark pulsed beneath torchlight. Mayron Vale stood beyond the carved circle. "You lied to us," Elara said. "I translated what was necessary." "You mean what was useful?" His expression remained calm. "The king is deteriorating. If he falls without a stable successor strong enough to hold the packs together, rival claims will become war. So you decided my life belongs to the kingdom. I decided one life cannot outweigh thousands." Elara looked around the chamber. On a stone pedestal rested another section of the ritual text. Not the incomplete version Mayron had shown them. This one continued. Elara moved toward it. No one stopped her. Perhaps they believed reading would convince her. Her eyes followed the ancient lines. Then she understood why Kael had burned the other pages. The corruption was not destroyed. It required a vessel. The marked bearer. A completed bond would draw the accumulated curse from the Alpha bloodline and force it into the person carrying the mark. Elara's stomach turned. The image from Blackwood returned with terrible clarity. The ancient Alpha. The marked woman. Blackness moving from one body into another. Not healing. Transfer. "And afterward?" Elara asked. Mayron was silent. She looked at him. "What happens to the bearer?" His hesitation answered before his words did. "The surviving accounts suggest deterioration." "How long?" "That varies. Until she dies." Mayron did not deny it. A roar shook the corridor outside. Every guard in the chamber turned. Elara knew that voice. "Kael." The doors shuddered under an impact. Mayron moved quickly to the pedestal and took up a metal seal engraved with the royal crest. "Prepare the circle." Elara backed away. The guards hesitated. Another impact cracked the doors. "You said the ritual required a completed bond," Elara said. "It requires the marked blood and royal authority to begin." Mayron raised the seal. Elara drew the small healer's blade still hidden inside her boot. She pressed it against her own marked wrist. "Come closer and I'll make sure you can't control how much blood reaches your circle." Mayron froze. For the first time his calm broke. The doors burst inward. Kael entered like violence given human form. 2 guards moved toward him and were thrown aside before they could stop him. The others retreated. Kael saw Elara. Then he saw the exposed mark. His face changed. "Elara." Mayron lifted the royal seal over the carved stone. "One more step and I begin it." Kael stopped. Every instinct in Elara screamed for him to attack, to end this. But he did not move. Because Mayron had found the one weapon capable of controlling the Alpha King. Her. Elara looked at Kael across the chamber. "You knew." Pain crossed his face. "Yes." "That it would move into me?" "Yes." "And that's why you kept leaving." Kael's silence became the answer to every moment she had misunderstood. The shrine. His hand almost touching her wrist. The way he had recoiled when the mark warmed. The forest. The burned pages. He had not been afraid that she would reject him. He had been afraid she would choose him anyway. Mayron's voice cut through the chamber. "The king lives, the packs remain stable, and one woman bears the cost. There is no rational alternative." Elara lowered the knife from her wrist. Mayron mistook the movement for surrender. Kael did not. "Elara, no." She looked directly at Mayron. "You're right about one thing. Kael doesn't get to decide this for me." Then she looked at Kael. "And neither do you." Her hand closed around the torn ritual page. "If there is a choice to make, I make it knowing the truth." For the first time since she had entered Blackwood as someone else's offering, Elara understood the shape of the trap completely. Once, her pack had decided one unwanted healer was an acceptable price for everyone else's safety. Now powerful men were making exactly the same calculation. Only this time Elara would not walk into sacrifice because someone else had chosen her for it. Only this time Elara would not walk into sacrifice because someone else had chosen her for it. A sound rolled through the chamber. Not a growl from Kael. Something deeper. Older. The torches flickered as the guardian beast stepped through the shattered doorway. Every guard backed away. Mehran raised the royal seal. Stop it. No one moved. The guardian's dark coat caught the firelight in streaks of silver. Its gaze passed over the men surrounding the ritual circle, settled briefly on Kael, then fixed on Elara. Her mark burned. The symbols carved into the floor answered. Silver light traveled through lines that had been invisible moments before, spreading outward from beneath Elara's feet, until the entire chamber revealed an older pattern beneath the ritual circle. Elara looked down. The design was wrong. Or rather, the ritual they had been reading was incomplete. The guardian approached the pedestal and struck it with one massive paw. Stone cracked. A concealed inscription appeared beneath it. Mehran lunged toward the text. Kael caught him and threw him away from the circle. Elara dropped beside the exposed inscription. The words matched fragments she had studied in the archives, but their meaning changed everything. The marked bearer had never been created to receive the curse. The mark existed to stop its passage. Long ago, Alpha rulers had discovered they could preserve corrupted power by transferring its cost into bonded bearers. What later generations called salvation had been a cycle of sacrifice. The guardian had been bound to prevent that cycle from continuing. Elara looked at the beast. Memory returned with sudden clarity. Its wounded body in Blackwood, its teeth close enough to kill her, her own trembling hands lowering the knife anyway. You chose me. The guardian lowered its head. Not because she was weak enough to sacrifice. Because when faced with something powerful and dangerous, she had chosen neither submission nor destruction. She had chosen differently. Kael came beside her. What does the rest say? Elara read. Her hope faltered. The curse can be interrupted. Mehran pushed himself upright. Then performed the ritual. Elara ignored him. But the power carrying it has to be surrendered. Kael understood first. The inherited alpha power. Elara nodded. The unnatural dominance passed through Kael's bloodline was intertwined with the corruption. Breaking one meant relinquishing the other. And the marked bearer? He asked. She has to enter the bond willingly long enough to redirect the curse into the old wards. Kael's face hardened. Risk? I don't know. Then no. Elara almost laughed. Even now, you don't get to make this choice alone. And neither do you. No, she looked at him. We make our own. The chamber trembled. Darkness spread beneath the skin at Kael's throat. His curse was breaking through. Mehran seized the moment. Without that power you may lose the throne. You're wolf. Everything that makes you alpha. Kael looked at Elara. Then he removed the royal seal from the floor where Mehran had dropped it. For generations, that symbol had represented the authority his bloodline protected at any cost. Kael placed it in Elara's hand. I choose her. Mehran stared at him. Kael's voice remained steady despite the darkness spreading beneath his skin. Not the throne. Not the power. Her. He stepped into the ancient circle. The carved lines ignited. Kael staggered as something black surged beneath his skin toward his arm. Elara could leave. The doorway stood open. No guard blocked it now. No elder waited outside to force her into the darkness. For the first time since this began, escape was completely hers. She looked at the exit, then at Kael, and chose. Elara stepped into the circle. Elara. My choice. She took his hand. Pain exploded through both of them. The mark blazed silver as darkness rushed from Kael toward their joined hands. For one horrifying instant, Elara felt it searching for her, trying to follow the ancient path into a new vessel. She remembered the vision, the woman, the transfer. No, Elara tightened her grip. She did not pull the corruption into herself. She pushed through the mark toward the older lines beneath their feet. The guardian roared. Silver light erupted around its body and raced through the chamber floor. Kael cried out. The force inside him resisted, bound not only to his blood but to generations of inherited power. He looked at Elara once, then surrendered it. The pressure filling the chamber vanished from him in a violent wave. Darkness struck the silver lines. The Guardian planted itself at the edge of the circle, as the released corruption surged toward the ancient wards instead of Elara. Stone cracked. Torches died. For several seconds there was nothing but silver light and the sound of Kael breathing through pain. Then silence. Elara opened her eyes. She was still holding his hand. The darkness beneath his skin was gone. Kael sank to one knee. Elara dropped beside him. Kael. His eyes opened. They were clear. Different somehow. The crushing supernatural dominance that had always surrounded him was gone. But he was alive. Behind them, the ritual circle had split from end to end. The Guardian stood among the fading silver lines. Elara looked at her wrist. The mark remained, but it no longer burned. Kael had surrendered the power that guaranteed his supremacy, rather than purchase survival with her life. And Elara had entered the bond only after she was finally free to walk away. The curse had expected another sacrifice. Instead, for the first time in generations, two people had refused to give it one. The curse had expected another sacrifice. Instead, for the first time in generations, two people had refused to give it one. The consequences reached beyond the broken ritual chamber. With the hidden inscriptions exposed and the complete ritual records recovered, Mehran could no longer present Elara's death as necessary salvation. The truth of the old system spread through the council. Generations of marked bearers had paid for the royal bloodline's corrupted power, and the ritual Mehran had tried to force upon Elara would only have continued that cycle. His faction lost the weapon it had built from fear. Mehran lost more. The scholar who had claimed to protect the kingdom had concealed the true cost of the ritual, helped seize Elara, and attempted to use royal authority against the king's command. Once those facts became known, the political alliance behind him fractured. But Kael's survival created another question. The supernatural force that had once announced his presence before he entered a room was gone. He remained a wolf. He remained Kael. But the inherited dominance that had made resistance to his bloodline almost unthinkable had vanished with the curse. Some pack leaders saw weakness. Others saw something they had never been offered before. A choice. Kael did not threaten them into obedience. He did not pretend nothing had changed. He stood before the assembled leaders and told them that anyone who followed him now would do so without the corrupted power that had helped his ancestors command submission. One by one they remained. Not because his blood forced them, because when preserving his supremacy had required sacrificing Elara, their king had surrendered supremacy instead. Elara watched from the edge of the hall. For most of her life, powerful people had decided what she was worth. Bad luck, disposable healer, offering, marked bearer, savior of the king. She rejected the last title as firmly as the others. When the council discussed granting her ceremonial rank, Elara asked for something different. A place near Blackwood where healers could work independently, and where the ancient boundary wards could be studied and restored rather than feared. Kael gave her neither permission nor ownership. He gave her support. The sanctuary became hers to build. Weeks passed. The wounds at Kael's ribs finally closed and did not reopen. Elara's mark remained silver-black beneath her skin, but the painful reactions stopped. The Guardian did not return to the stronghold. There was one final choice left between them. Kael found Elara outside the sanctuary one morning. "No guards," she observed. "You complained about them." "I complained about being watched. I remember every complaint." She smiled despite herself. He stopped before her, leaving the final distance for her to decide. "I won't ask you to stay because you saved me," he said. "And I won't ask because of the mark." "Good. I won't command it as your king." "Better." Something vulnerable entered his expression. "I am asking because when you leave a room I want you to come back." Elara remembered the man who had hunted her across the kingdom, and then recoiled from touching her. Now there was no curse between them. No ritual waiting to turn love into sacrifice. No law demanding that she complete what Blackwood had begun. She stepped forward. "I will." Their bond was completed by mutual choice, with no circle beneath their feet and no audience demanding a price. Later, Elara returned to Blackwood. The same boundary stones waited beneath the trees. She stopped before them as sunrise spilled through the branches. The first time she had stood there, Torches had burned behind her and men had ordered her forward. She had crossed at sunset because her pack had decided her life was the easiest one to lose. Now no one ordered her anywhere. Kael stood beside her. Not ahead of her. Not behind her. Beside her. Elara looked at the dark silver mark on her wrist, then crossed the boundary. Kael crossed with her. Deep among the trees something moved. The guardian beast emerged briefly between two ancient pines, its dark coat threaded with silver in the morning light. Its eyes met Elara's. There was no threat in them now. No question. The beast lowered its head once. Then it turned and disappeared into Blackwood. Elara watched until the forest became still again. Once she had entered those woods as an offering and survived the night with the beast. Then she had become the Alpha King's target. But Kael had learned that wanting her did not give him the right to possess her. And Elara had learned that survival did not leave her owing her life to anyone. She reached for his hand because she wanted to. Together they walked deeper into the morning. This time, no one had chosen Elara's path for her.